Thank you all for coming. This is, like Amishi said, it's a Saturday morning. I've needed about 3 coffees to be standing here. I don't know as to how many coffees have you needed to be sitting there, but I do hope that this might be worth some of that effort at the end. Okay. My day job. I work as the editor of National Geographic Traveler India. Travel is a strange thing. It's a weird thing, perhaps, for a travel editor to be confessing to. But I can safely say that travel makes me very anxious. It's about 2 hours before I'm leaving. I'm never packed. I always forget things. I always think that I'm going to end up in some foreign place and fall sick. And then it's about how many medicines should I keep. There are the medicines, of course, that I take every day for my condition. But then, my mother is like, have you, made sure that you had something for that throat ache of yours that you had last week? It might come back in again. You might eat something wrong, this, that, and the other. It gets pretty bad. But I think to myself sometimes, why does this idea make me anxious? I'm leaving home. I'm going somewhere where I will be foreign. I'm going somewhere where I don't know anybody. Essentially, I'm going somewhere, and my biggest fear is that I'm just going to keep asking myself, what am I doing here? It's a great book, by the way. What am I doing here? It's by this travel writer called Bruce Chatwin. And I really recommend it because it's all kinds of fantastic. But yes, what am I doing here? I ask myself that question right now. What am I doing here? I'm standing in front of you, fine people, and 2 years ago, and this was February of 2016. I was dragged out of my house in the middle of the night. Taken to a rehab on the outskirts of Bombay, where I spent about 5 weeks recovering from a manic attack. 2 years is not that long a time. If I were to count the number of hours I have spent in hospitals and mental health institutions, that would probably be close to about a year of my life, close to about one out of the 34 years I've spent nursing myself. After experiences like that, after experiences of being strapped to a bed because the doctors felt that I would run away. I did try to run away once. I do not prescribe it. It turned out to be very painful and bloody by the end. So no, don't. But the fact is that I feel bloody lucky. I feel bloody lucky to be standing here, to be standing in front of all of you, being able to tell my story, being able to tell you what anxiety feels like. I guess that's my one qualification. That's probably what I'm doing here. I am qualified enough to talk about anxiety. I felt a lot of it in my life. It's funny. So somebody, I get asked this question fairly often. People, even friends, come up to me and say, we think we're bipolar. So I'm like, wow, really? How? What gave you this idea that you might be like me? And they're like, we have all these mood swings, man. Yesterday I was so happy. Today I just don't feel like getting out of bed. It's, then after a while my boyfriend will call and I'll smile again. That's just crazy behavior, right? And I'm like, no, it's not. It's absolutely normal. It doesn't make you bipolar at all. Look, we're an exclusive club. Do not come and try to take membership, if you don't deserve it. That's usually what I try and tell these people. But they feel that there are a lot of people that feel that they know depression. There are a lot of people that they feel that they know mania. there are a lot of people that feel that they know anxiety. Now, I would like to perhaps make a bit of a distinction here. Um, there is sadness and there is depression. There is happiness, there is joy, and then there is mania. There is nervousness, and then there is anxiety. Um, the problem with that second category, depression, anxiety, mania, these can also be clinical terms. These can also make you get a prescription from a doctor. Nervousness, for instance, can't. Sadness, you'd be seeing a bad doctor if he gave you medicines for you being sad. I hope nobody medicates you for being happy. That's the best place to be. But the idea that while there is this distinction, while there is something perhaps less serious and while there is something more serious, I believe that if you are sad, you have what I would call enough of a starting point in order to be able to imagine what depression might feel like. If you're happy, if you're really euphoric one day, something has really worked out for you in life, and you multiply that feeling by about 10,000, and you imagine what it must be to feel this uncontained euphoria, which inevitably does become dangerous. That is mania. If you have felt nervous, as I did for 10 minutes before coming here, I can imagine what it must be like for somebody who might be diagnosed with a problem that is anxiety. And that is it, because what is empathy at the end of the day? It is that ability to be able to imagine what the other person is going through. It's kind of annoying, and I'm sure all of you have this feeling at some point in life. You're having a really rough day for all kinds of reasons, and life just is not looking rosy and is not looking up. Somebody comes and tells you, "I know exactly how you feel." And like, no, you have no idea how I feel. So don't try and tell me that you know how I feel. Perhaps a better thing for that person to say would be that I can imagine how you feel. And that's the thing about mental health. It takes, most of the time, I'm not saying all the time, but a lot of the time it takes a very common sentiment. It takes a very common feeling. It takes something that is very garden variety, and it stretches it to the point that it starts to become unhealthy. And I think that we would all benefit, people who suffer from a mental health affliction or people who don't, if we start looking at these as possibilities. That the fact that I might have perhaps thought that I was Shiva when I was manic is something that even somebody who's not bipolar can feel. You can wake up feeling that you're godlike. It's a terrible thing to feel, trust me. Never pans out well. But the fact is that it's not so outrageous, because the only thing that I'm doing is I am negotiating stories. These are stories that I heard. I grew up in a household that was fairly religious, and my grandmother and my father in particular, both devout Hindus. My mum and grandfather too, for that matter. They of course told me the Cinderella and the Thumbelina and the Hansel and Gretel. But the stories that they put me to sleep to were stories about Shiva, were stories about Krishna, were stories about that seemed so wonderful. And I used to have terribly prosaic questions like, "Acha, how is a thief a good person?" Given that Krishna was, of course, a thief. And I used to ask questions like this and annoy my grandmother. But what kind of started happening slowly, gradually, over the years, is that I perhaps did take it too far. I took this empathy that I felt for characters, either in stories or in films, a little too seriously. I not only thought I was Shiva, I also thought I was Bradley Cooper in Silver Linings Playbook because, hey, he was bipolar, so am I. So, as a matter of fact, I do have a clip from Silver Lining Playbook to show you in a little while. The idea is that Bradley Cooper in Silver Linings Playbook is somebody who is struggling, constantly struggling with his diagnosis. He has been told, look, you're bipolar. He has been told that he's a danger to society. There's a restraining order. He's kept away from his ex-wife, from people who know her, because he did something terrible. He found her making love with a colleague in the shower, and he beat the hell out of that colleague. And to the extent that the colleague needed urgent medical help, and he did that not only because he was jealous, but he did that because he was bordering on mania, because he had no control. I just want to see if I could get that Silver Linings clip to start right now. How many of you have actually seen Silver Linings Playbook? So, okay. Oh, great, fantastic. I really don't need to show this clip, but nonetheless, to probably jog your memories. So what happens in the film, and this is a kind of theory that I have. Bipolarity can be explained as a chemical imbalance in the brain. So what happens is that chemicals like serotonin and dopamine and things like that that make us happy, a lack of which makes us sad. That's completely off balance in my brain, for instance. So what happens is that affects my moods. That doesn't make me moody. No, it's not like I'm angry one minute and then I'm crying the other. No, I'm actually I'm not moody at all. My mood is fairly consistent, but once in a while it swings, and it swings very wildly. And it goes to one end where, for instance, you have me who's manic, and you have me who's not sleeping at all. I don't sleep for nights on end. I still have insane amounts of energy. I'm calling people through the night at all times, wanting to tell them as to how beautiful this world is suddenly, or how I remember that when I was with this friend in class 6, he had told me something while walking up the stairs that changed my life. Almost everything changes your life when you're manic. Not just what you're going through, but what you've been through. It's all life-changing. The funny thing, the other side is, of course, depression. I don't want to get out of bed. I do not want to communicate with anybody. I do not want to call anyone. If anybody is calling me, I do not want to take their call. I am... that isolation is making my own loneliness reek. But strangely, this is and that feeling of depression is exactly what follows straight after mania. Which is why very often bipolarity is represented as a roller coaster. It isn't. There are actually long phases where your life is absolutely no different from anyone else's. But there are these phases, of course, when you have a really big high and then a low. Now, this is a description of bipolarity. I think anybody who's known anyone who's bipolar, or anybody who is bipolar perhaps themselves, would be able to relate to this description. It's still, for me, not a very satisfying description. It's not satisfying because it doesn't explain my state of mind. What am I going through? Why is it that when, for instance, I am sleepless and energetic and excited, Why do I want to reach out to so many people? Why is it so hard for me to reach out to people when I'm depressed? The only way that me, somebody who has who studied a bit of lit theory in college, I was a literature student. The only way that I can explain it to myself is through that opposition of self and other. I can't have enough of the other when I'm high. Everyone is my friend. I fall in love at, with someone new every hour, and it feels like true, real love. It's I'm desperate. I'm desperate for a connection because I suddenly feel that we're all connected, that there is a narrative that binds us all together, and this is a narrative that I invent, but in my narrative, we are all coordinates on that same graph. We're all coordinates on the same chart, and I will be able I will try my level best that in a conversation with you when I'm manic, I will try and convince you that there's actually no difference between who you are, between how we see the world. Um, and when I'm depressed, I cannot escape my prison of self. I just can't do it. My pain is mine alone. Nobody can understand it. Nobody can see what I'm going through. There is a lot of anxiety in both states. There is, um, uh, and in this one clip that I want to start with, which is a Silver Linings Playbook clip, Bradley Cooper has been released from the center where he was being kind of detained, kind of rehab mental health facility. He's come back home to live with his parents. His ex-wife teaches literature in college, and he wants to read all the books that she teaches so that he can go back to her and win her over. In this scene, he's reading Ernest Hemingway, and this is what happens when he does read Ernest Hemingway. So that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Sorry, you do not have the distraction on the screen. You have me to suffer for the rest of this time. Very quickly, what happens in the scene is that he's reading Ernest Hemingway and he gets really, really, really pissed off while reading Hemingway. Why does he get pissed off while reading Hemingway? Because Hemingway goes, there are these two people in love. The two characters in this book, and finally there is this possibility that they're going to be together. She's pregnant with his child, they're dancing, everyone is happy, and what does Hemingway do next? He kills the woman. Bradley Cooper cannot take it. He just cannot tolerate as to how Hemingway can do this and kill all the happiness and all the joy in the world, and he flings the book out of the window, and he goes and wakes his parents up. It's 4 a.m, but he wants to wake his parents up to talk about this great injustice. How could Hemingway do this to me? I have woken my parents up a lot at 4 a.m. I must warn you, they've been very patient. My mom thankfully wakes up pretty early, 5 o'clock, so she doesn't mind so much. My father, on the other hand, is seriously grumpy, but he tolerates me. He listens to my crazy narratives. But I ask myself, like Bradley Cooper, why do I go waking up my parents? Why is there this terrible need in the middle of the night for me to have an audience? Why is it that when we are scared, we go to our mothers? Why is it that, when we want some kind of validity, we try to find our fathers? And I think we do that, and it's a habit that we have from a fairly young age. We see ourselves in the way that people see us. We see ourselves the way that we get reflected in their narratives. That starts mattering more to us sometimes than our own narrative. It's that same feeling that, when we grow up, we look for in love. Oh, fantastic. You can now see this scene from Silver Linings Playbook.
I just can't believe he's teaching that book to the kids. I mean, it's the whole time he's breaking down. The whole time we're pretending with that to ride the board and to be the woman who's on snap the board. And he does. He does. He survives after getting blown up. He survives it, and he escapes to Switzerland with Catherine. And now Catherine's pregnant. Isn't that wonderful? She's pregnant. And they escape from the mountains to make me happy. And they're going to be drinking wine and dance and going to dance with each other, singing and dancing. But I like it. They were happy. You think he ends it there? No. He writes another ending. She dies, Dad. I mean, the world's hard enough as it is, guys. It's fucking hard enough as it is. Can't somebody say, hey, let's be positive? Let's have a good ending to the story?
Dad, he owes us an apology.
Mom, I can't apologize. I'm not going to apologize for this. You know what I will do? I will apologize for that first ending. You have to understand what it calls us and apologize to us too.
Yeah, so, after I went to watch this film with my family, my father is still convinced that he's Robert De Niro. I try to convince him he's not, but he does not believe me otherwise. That's a very typical kind of half manic scene, right? Sure, I mean, there's this interplay between him and his parents, and like I said, there's perhaps no greater depiction of self and other. Parent-child is perhaps the best depiction of that relationship. But the real relationship here is that he really, really wants to impress his wife, and he is still his wife. I think they aren't divorced yet, and he will do anything that it takes, even if it means like reading a book, starting a book in the afternoon and reading it till 4 in the morning. Why? I ask myself, why this desperation? Why do I, for instance, call half my exes when I'm manic? I do it all the time, and it's amazing. The reminiscing is just beautiful because I remember so much suddenly. But I think it's because it is in that moment of love that we're able to return to a plenitude which is simple, to a kind of wholeness where we don't have to worry about necessarily who we are all the time, what we're saying, how we're being, how somebody's understanding us or not. It's just intimacy that makes us feel so much better. This is, of course, something that happens when a character is manic. When I'm depressed too, it has happened so many times that somebody has literally come into my life and loved me and picked me up from where I was. It was because of them that I was able to again come back into this world and to be able to participate in it, to not just be a spectator, not just be someone on the outside, but actually to be or to play a role that was productive or conducive, or to be a better friend or to be a better son. Often enough, it was because a woman loved me that I was able to do those things. I will just stop and read out. It's a short passage from the book I wrote, but here goes. So, in magazines and newspapers, a signature motif has come to define modern illustrations of mental health afflictions. The manic depressive mind in particular is often depicted as a secluded prison. As a result, these visual representations all unwittingly say that if you're bipolar, your chances of freedom are slim. There is admittedly something a tad nauseating about the suggestion that love can unlock those dark cells. But in my experience, love is more of a break-in, a stealthy rescue mission. Maudlin as it undoubtedly sounds, I have been saved by love a few times over, and each time I have expectedly found precedents for my liberation in films. So in this chapter, I talk about I talk about how love has rescued me and how love has saved me, and I do that through the prism of three films. One is Garden State, if some of you know that strange Zach Braff film. Then there's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and there is Opu Shonchar, which is a film by Satyajit Ray, translated into the world of Opu. I realize I have taken a lot of your time, and I am going to quickly speed this up. I, I just want to, before I show you the single clip from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and then start concluding, I want to say that there are so many times in our lives when we close all our doors. And I have found that there's comfort in doing that sometimes. There is comfort in finding that solitude, finding that aloneness, being impenetrable. But life has shown me that, love is a window, or the possibility of that love is a window that one should perhaps keep open. And one should perhaps keep that open because of various things. And it doesn't necessarily need to be the love of a beloved or of a lover. It could be friendship, it could be companionship, it could be familial kind of ties. But it changes so much. It makes one very anxious. It makes me exceedingly anxious. It's like if I'm quoting somebody, or if I've just started dating someone, and on WhatsApp, if they send you the thumbs up emoticon, that makes me so anxious, because I'm like, I've just been bro-zoned. That's terrible. I hate that. And it's a very keen, particular anxiety. Any silence, if somebody doesn't message you back, you've sent them a really lovely message and, kind of poured your heart out, or even tried to be subtle, but you really want that person to either just laugh or send you a winky or something. And that doesn't happen for really long, and you get really distressed. That is anxiety. Love really does make us all very, very anxious as people. But strangely, in my experience, it is that love that kind of comes and is able to cure that anxiety too. And it is able to cure that because it reminds you of things that, happiness should be shared, as, we learn, I guess, from narratives like Into the Wild, and that we don't necessarily need to feel so alone. Anxiety, the problem with anxiety is that, at least for me, every time that I have felt anxious because I have felt that there is no other, that no other could possibly exist, and that no other would come to rescue, or come to uplift, or come to bring levity. The fact is that there will always be another, and you don't have to necessarily spend your time waiting or going out looking earnestly. But the point is to keep oneself ready. To keep oneself ready for influence, to keep oneself open enough that somebody can come in and influence your days and influence your life. It's hard to do when you're depressed, and the reason why I want to show you this quick clip from Eternal Sunshine is because Jim Carrey in this moment, I relate to Jim Carrey a lot, even his other films, but with this one more so. Because this is exactly what I'm like when I'm depressed. I'm awkward, I don't know what to do. When somebody really pretty is saying that, will you have a drink with me? I usually say no, and that's what he's doing in this scene. But I just want you to see as to how it ends, and then I'll just, maybe have two lines to say, and we will wrap this up. So to wrap up, there are these moments in cinema that I love. Perhaps one of my favorite moments in cinema would have to be Jim Carrey coming back home, fiddling around, wanting to call really badly, doing something, sitting down, and then just calling. Um, and and he calls, and Kate Winslet says, "Do you miss me?" And he says, "Oddly enough, I do." And he breaks into this smile. Jim Carrey, until before this point in the entire film, has been nothing but surly. He's walked around with a frown. He's been sad, and he's been sad because, as you realize when you watch the film, he's lost something that is very, very precious to him. Technically, this is the first time he's meeting Kate Winslet. It's kind of strange when a woman on the first encounter, like, comes up to you and says, "I'm going to marry you." I know that. I get that. You know, she is all kinds of strange, but she writes her number on his hand. The only thing that I want to end by saying is that one can talk about anxiety until the cows come home. There's as you know, we've heard, and I'm sure we've all felt, we all know it. We all know it in some shape, form, or the other. Sometimes, of course, we get so wrapped up in our own anxiety, in our waiting for somebody to come and write their numbers on our hands, that we forget that sometimes maybe we should take the pen out too. Maybe sometimes we should reach out. When a person does not look at ease, when there are ways to say that it's going to be okay. Because look, no matter how bad it is, we find a way of surviving. We find a way of being okay, perhaps, in the end. Conversation, you know, the more that one can talk to someone else without being hierarchical, without being patronizing, as a friend, as an equal, with the agenda of being able to laugh as much as possible in that conversation, one would probably find that we'd be living in a better place, that we'd be living in a happier place, and perhaps some of us, as a consequence, might be less anxious. Today, I'm here. I still don't know what I'm doing here, to come back to a question I was talking about earlier. But I know how I'm here. I'm here because I have people who love me. I'm here because there are people who I love. Some of these people I speak to every day. Some of these people I speak to once in a while. But when we do, we have a single agenda, is to share. Is to share any kind of pleasure, is to share any kind of pain, in order to be able to alleviate it without saying that I know how you feel. But just by saying that it might just be possible for me to imagine what you might be going through. Sometimes there is no reason. When I'm manic, I say things I don't know why I'm saying them. When I'm depressed, I'm so sad, I don't know why. Nobody's done anything, nobody's said anything. But I am. You don't necessarily need to come to anxiety thinking that I need to have a lot of answers to offer, or that it's something that needs to be understood and dissected. Sometimes it's just something that needs to be felt. And once one is able to go through that and to be able to articulate it in some way, I guess the start is always to say that, you know, look, I am feeling anxious, or I am anxious about something. And for the other person to go, oh, don't, rather, you know, for the other person to say, don't feel like that. Maybe the other person should probably say, let's just sit down and watch Silver Linings Playbook or Eternal Sunshine. Because Kate Winslet, as she confesses, gets anxious about all kinds of things. And it makes us who we are. I would not like to live in a world without anxiety. Sometimes it makes us do things that we wouldn't otherwise. Sure, it can be painful. And we should all seek help. We should all seek conversations, pay for a therapist if things are getting too bad. But if not, well, you know, read a book, watch a film, have a good meal, find a friend, and life is not as difficult or hard as anxiety might make you feel it is. And that's me done. Thank you so very much.